I'm going to read it quickly, but I'm going to read it with some clarity. My translation is going to be a little different than the norm. I know it is custom for the King James Version, but in this season of my life personally, the Lord has permitted me to reread a lot of things in the New Living Translation. In John chapter 5, verses 1 through 9, it reads as such: afterward, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days. Inside the city near the sheep gate was the pool of Bethesda, the 5 covered porches, crowds of sick people, blind, lame, or paralyzed, laying on the porches. One of the men laying there had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, he asked him, "Would you like to get well?" "I can't, sir," the sick man said, "for I have no one to put me in the pool when the water bubbles up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and walk." Instantly the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and began walking. But this miracle happened on the Sabbath. You may be seated. For the time we share together, I simply want to preach from the thought, getting back to real church. Getting back to real church. This subject is not an indicator that church recently has been taken. The subject matter for today is not an attack or an assassination on modern church. But it is a reminder that we must consider that inside of church lies some grand traditions. And upon our appropriate assessment, we will discover that inside of tradition exists the reality that some tradition is to be treasured forever, and some tradition is to be discarded. Because with evolution and with progression, you will find there are some things you hold to, but there are also some things you let go of, which means there's never a good time to have too much old, and there's never a good time to have too much new. It is our responsibility to find the appropriate balance in which the Lord is trying to get his will to come forth, and not just a day, but in today. The reality is, here in John chapter 5, Bethesda is historically known as the house of mercy. Mercy is the compassionate or kindly forbearance shown toward an offender or a wrongdoer. Mercy is also understood to be the discretionary power of a person in power to pardon someone or lessen the punishment of their action. Bethesda was a place created and intended for mercy to trump mess. Bethesda was a place created and intended for prayer to trump preference. Bethesda was a place created where favor was designed to trump favoritism, where forgiveness was supposed to be greater than finger pointing. However, we have decades and seasons and years of evidence that shows the danger of community not having unity. Here at Bethesda, we see the danger of preferring uniqueness over commonality. There's a certain man who has been sick, a certain man who has been unwell, a certain man who has been ill, a certain man who has been unable. He's been this way for 38 years, and he finds himself in the house of mercy. But after a few seasons, he discovers while he is in mercy's house, mercy doesn't seem to live there anymore. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the conviction upon me right now won't allow me to ignore, unfortunately, that the universal church today is looking a lot like Bethesda, as our offering is landing us in contradiction with our purpose. The church has been historically known as the house of prayer, but it has been my recent discovery that the house of the Lord has often been the hoarder of problems. We hoard problems, and we come with complaints, and we come with misery, and we come being downtrodden. When the reality of the church was, this is the place you come for your hope to be reassured, for your hope and your faith to be reignited, for your trust in God to be strengthened, for you to believe that you truly are redeemed and that God does have blessed assurance for your life. The reality is the church has become a place where we have silenced the faithful and put forth the fashion. Unfortunately, we're living in a time where church is more of a fashion show than a faith statement. The church is supposed to be where healing and deliverance takes place, but unfortunately, we are living in a culture where church has become the place where sneaky links hook up. We have become distracted. The sanctuary around the globe is getting sexier and sexier. Lights are getting dimmer. Smoke is getting bigger. Songs are getting less sanctified and more sensual. Worship is becoming more planned and less urged and ushered. We are getting to a place where we, as the church, are majoring more in the attention span of the person who has come into the sanctuary, and we are minoring in the deprived attention of their heart. People of God, it's time to put God back at the center, because the last time I checked, it was Jesus who was the center of our joy. And when Jesus is at the center, everything you need to be balanced will be present. But when Jesus finds himself on the outside of your perspective, there's going to be some turbulence that you have to go through in order for God to get through. The reality of it is, when God is the center of our joy, the least, the lost, and the left out become the favorable and the faithful. This man who has no name has been informed to have an infirmity for 38 years. He found himself in what has historically been identified as the right place, but he seemingly is there at the wrong time. The more modern Bethesda became, the less mercy Bethesda bestowed. Getting back to real church doesn't mean going back to the past, but it means having the ability to bring the best of the past into today. It means to take the best of today and connect it to the best of yesterday. Because there are some rituals that we have gotten away from that we need to put back in place for the sanctity of the believer. We used to say things like, hold to his hand. God's unchanging hand. That was a message to let you know, no matter what you're going through, you don't have to question if God is present. Because God is both faithful and ever present, meaning God always sees what you're dealing with. He knows what you're going through, and he has not forgotten the plans he says he has for you. We understand that life sometimes gets to life in real well, and you get to wondering if God really does still love you. But the reality, people of God, there's never a moment in your life where God falls out of love with you. If we're being honest, it was the dirtiness of your past that got God's attention, because God says, because I have more for you, and I'm willing to get the dirt off of you. That's why God is not interested in you being overly concerned about people judging you. God wants you to understand that the relationship he has carved out for you is between you and him. It's a relationship that God is 1,000% invested in. And God says there's never a time in your life where my eyes will be closed to you. There's never a time in your life where my hands will be closed to you. There's never a time in your life where my arms will not be extended to embrace you, because I so value you that while you were at your worst self, while you were the worst version of yourself, I permitted my son to die for you, because that's how much I care about you. That's how much I love you. That's how much I desire for you to have blessings and not tail. That's how much I want you to be the head and not the tail. I allow myself to die that you might have the right at eternal life. God says he don't care what derogatory thing anybody has ever said about you or perhaps done to you. God says, I so believe in you that I claimed you as my own. No matter what you may be dealing with, you must remember that you have been specifically made in the likeness and image of God, which means there's nothing about you that is a mistake, because God was intentional and carving you out. The reality is, the children of God belong to God, so that those who have access to the children will have access to the Father. The reality is, everybody's not going to have access to God, because everybody is not like you. Everybody didn't intentionally make their way to church on Sunday morning today. There are some people who intentionally rolled over at the time their alarm clock went on. There were some people who intentionally made sure last night there was no alarm set because they were not going to church today. Everybody is not going to be like you. But the benefit of you being you is that when you come in contact with folks who are not like you, while they are not you, because of you, they'll have access to the very thing that fuels you. So they may not get the one-to-one immediate blessedness that you have from God, but because they meet you, they will find out and discover life is worth the living just because he lived. The reality is, when you get back to real church, you stop being so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good. When you get back to real church, you really do care about your neighbor. When you get back to real church, it is important that the human beside you understands that they are human. I know sometimes we can become so spiritual that we allow our gift to blind us to humanity. But because God gives you an anointing and because God gives you a spiritual gift, does not mean it is your job to weaponize your spirituality. That means everything is not demonic. Sometimes it means you do need to stop being rude. Sometimes it is appropriate for you to say, good morning, and how are you doing? I know some people think church is a place where you go to show just how super spiritual we can be. You let people know, I'm gifted. But if you never give me the chance to know you, I don't think you're gifted. I think there's something wrong with you. And what Jesus does here in chapter 5 is he undoes our recent discovery of spirituality. Because we think our spirituality is determined by how well we speak in tongues. We believe that our spirituality is determined by how well we shout and how much rhythm we've got when the music gets to playing. We have concluded that our spirituality is determined by our ability to lay our hands on people and watch them fall out. But the reality of it is how your spirituality is determined by how well you handle one another. When Jesus meets this man, he does not come off as super spiritual. But he humanizes this man who has been for years stepped over. And Jesus poses a question. Would you like to get well? In King James Version it says, would you be made whole? It's not a spiritual question. It's a human question. Because your spirituality is not supposed to erase your humanity. Your spirituality is to make better your humanity. Because God is not going to put supernatural anointing inside of a broken and busted vessel. which means you have to be sure that your humanity is in check so that God can trust the spirituality he has to release for you to the benefit of somebody else. Can I be honest? It's very contradictory to have God's spirit and a nasty attitude. You want to know what is demonic? For you to have God's gift and be unapproachable. It is very ungodly for God to have signs of him being with you, but your actions say, I don't know who God is. It's important, people of God, that we have relationship better than we have religion. It is important that we have relationship over the routine of gathering. And that's what Jesus put before us here in John chapter 5. He asked this man, do you want to be better? Because the Bible says Jesus, after looking at him and knowing that he has been in this condition for quite some time, understood that based upon this man's psyche, that's going to determine what I can do for him. And here's the reality for all of you who are the answer to the problem that everyone else has around you. You know, the person that's always getting a call. You know, the person who everybody believes always got some money. The person that everybody is counting on to answer the phone, to respond to the text message. You know, the strong friend. A lot of you, I can see that some of you are really the strong friend, and you don't have the ability to say no. But God says, here's the word for you today. You can't help everybody. And your inability to not help everybody does not mean you're not skilled. But it's going to be hard to help people who do not want your help. And I know a lot of people want to be helped the way they want to be helped. But sometimes the reason God puts you in the lives of people is because God needs you to help them in the way they need to be helped, not want to be helped. Which means for you, you're not going to be able to help everybody. That's not a mark against you. You did not fail. But you should not be stressing yourself out because folk won't let you help them the way they need to be helped. Jesus asked this man, do you want to be well? Because Jesus understood he's been in this shit for so long, I gotta know him to help him. It wasn't spiritual, it was humane. The man says, in response to Jesus, I can't, because nobody's ever willing to help me. Somebody's always stepping over me, getting to the water before me. If Jesus would have simply been spiritual in the matter, the man would have never been able to say what had been bothering him. If we take a close look, it's not his ailment that's bothering him. It's that he's come to the house of mercy and he's never experienced mercy. He's come to the house of help, but he never got help. He's come to the house of consideration, but no one has ever considered him. That is not spiritual. That's physical. That's humane. He says, the very place they told me I can come and get what I need is the very place I got the most hurt. It's the very place I've experienced the most pain. It's the very place that has caused me the most stress. Jesus says to this man, do you want to be made whole? He says, I can't. I enjoy what Jesus did because Jesus' response to the man was an instruction that the man was sure he could not do. Jesus says to him, rise, take up your bed and walk. He says, stand, take up your mat and walk. The man, I'm sure, looked at Jesus and wondered, what is wrong with him? Because clearly, I'm laying here because I cannot do what you are instructing me to do. But what Jesus reveals for us is sometimes people can be in a thing so long. It's not that they cannot do it. It's that they've been there so long they forgot how. Which means everything that you're going through is not demonic. Some things are just the consistency of the routine of being stuck. And you got some people in your life that's going to need you to call them later because you realize ain't nothing really wrong with you. You just been stuck. And it's time for you to stand up and not be stuck no more. It's time for you to stand up and not be okay with things being the way that they have been. You don't really need a miracle. You just need to stand up. You don't really need me to do something supernatural. All you need to do is really just naturally stand up. The reality is you actually got yourself in that situation, but I'm going to help you get yourself out of that situation. You don't need us to have a prayer meeting. All you need is to stand up. The reason this moment was important is because Jesus revealed to me that oftentimes the more spiritual we behave, the more segregated we behave. Because the reason the Lord will send you to somebody who needs to be reminded to stand up is because they lost the sense of ability to do it for themselves. And the reason you have received as much preaching, and the reason you have received as much Bible class, and the reason you attended so many prayer meetings, and the reason you have been brought in to intercede on the behalf of so many people is because God understands there are going to be people who are going to meet you who don't think like you. They can't see what God has the way you can see. They don't know God the way you know God. And because they have met you, they will then be all the better for it. You've been in this condition for too long. You may not know how to get out. Jesus says, stand up. The Bible says, and instantly, what this man thought he couldn't do, he was able to do. The average person you come in contact with this week, they are going to be impressed with your kindness, not because they're a terrible person, but because of how unfamiliar kindness is to them. I've discovered the deeper we try to make humanity, the worse we make it. Sometimes we just got to keep it simple. You want to make somebody's day? Say hello as you walk past. It ain't costing you nothing. You're doing it in motion, so you're not losing no time. You ain't got to reach in your pocket. You ain't got to find out their cash app. All you need was say hello. I didn't even ask you a question. I just said hello. I don't even want to give you the insinuation that I'm getting ready to stop. But I am going to remove from you the idea that I do not see you. I want you to know you are visible. Every time you just say hello to somebody, you are reaffirming to them, I see you. And somebody sees you. And you don't know what they were wrestling with. You don't know what they were dealing with. You don't know how depressed they were. But just your simple hello just undid everything they thought, because they thought they were alone. They thought they were invisible. They thought they were insignificant. They thought they were unimportant. And you just reminded them you so important that it was important to me to make sure that you heard my voice. In the classroom, we say it like this. I have to remind some of my coworkers, the students do not care how much you know until they know how much you care, which means they're not going to let you teach them nothing until you learn something about them. And I know for a fact that I teach math. And every kid tells me I hate math. But the more I learn about them, the more they begin to fall in like with math. They don't really fall in love with it. But they find out it's not as hard as I thought it was. But the reason they thought it was hard was because somebody said something harsh to them before I met them. Somebody told them they weren't smart enough when they actually were. Somebody told them they weren't understanding when in actuality the person teaching them didn't understand how to teach it to them. So sometimes you will meet people who have had some run-ins with some folks that didn't know how to talk to them. But when they meet you, they're going to find out I didn't even know people were that nice. Jesus says to him, when you want to be made one, he said, I can't. People step over me. Jesus said, stand up. Take up your bed and walk. Jesus doesn't touch him. He doesn't do anything spooky. He doesn't do anything mysterious. He just speaks to him. I like this because it reminds me we don't know how he got there. We don't even know how long he had been at Bethesda. We just know that he had a need of healing for 38 years. We don't know if he was born this way or if he did something. But the reality is, he left getting what he needed. And what Jesus shows us is not just how to get out of something you've been in, but he shows us how to help people get out of it. Because you might not have the gift that somebody else has, but you got a voice. And as long as your voice is always connected to the belief that God is the greatest power. It's in Proverbs where it says death and life are in the power of the tongue, which is an insinuation that the difference between staying in something and coming out of something is often found in what comes out of your mouth. And the reason we teach children to not say, I can't, is because the more they say I can't, the more they begin to believe that they can't. But when you teach them I can, no matter how much they mess up, when they're no longer in your presence, they'll find themselves perhaps struggling, but yet still confident, because you have instilled in them that no matter how many times it takes, how many mistakes they make, how many times they slip up, if they stay confident and they have the ability to reaffirm themselves and simply say, I can, eventually they will be able to celebrate the fact that they were finally successful at the very thing they were struggling to do in the beginning. And I like what Jesus says to the man. He says, arise, take up your bed and walk. Rise means to save, and take means to seize. Walk means to go forward. And the reality, people of God, is that God's going to bring somebody into your vicinity this week, and you are going to tell them to stand up, to seize the moment, and to go forth into the promises that God has for them. And you will be the one that reminds them that when they face disappointment, and if they face frustration, if they experience episodes of loneliness, if they have moments of despair, in a minute of depression, when they want to quit or throw in the towel, you will be the one who reminds them, and he is a faithful friend. And they're going to ask you, who was Andy? And you will tell them, it's not who he is, but it's what he does. And they'll say, Andy, I don't understand. And you will simply explain to them, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me that I am his own. And he is the great I am, and he is the Prince of Peace, and he is the Lord of Lords, and he is the is the wheel in the middle of the wheel, and he is the lily in the valley, the bright morning star, and he is a friend that's sticking closer than any brother. Is there anybody here that knows that he is a good God? We serve a God who is able to do exceeding abundantly above all we can ask or think, according to the power that works on the inside. But now unto him who is able to keep you going and present you boldness before the presence of his joy with exceeding joy, to the only wise God, our Savior, his glory and majesty, dominion and power, both now and forever. I cannot wait until the day that we get back to having real church, that we get to having church the old time way, where we would therefore I will trust in the Lord until I die. I'm gonna treat everybody right until I die. Is there anybody that knows the God we serve is a good God? If you love him and you know that he's good, open up your mouth and say yes. Yes, 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 yes. He's a good God. He's all right with me. And I'm telling you, the things he's done for me, he'll do the same thing for you. Does anybody know that God we serve is a faithful God? One last time, if you don't mind preaching with me, open up your mouth and say yes, 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 yes. Oh, yes. Getting back to real church, putting value back in your neighbor. The greatest miracle that we can use is making sure the person beside us, behind us, knows that we can see them. And at this time, we extend the invitation to discipleship. We open the doors of the church. And we extend this opportunity for